I never imagined Thanksgiving would be the day my family erased me. The smell of roasted turkey filled my parents' dining room as relatives laughed over old stories and children chased each other through the hallway. It looked like the kind of holiday people post on social media to prove they have the perfect family. I should have known better. For as long as I could remember, appearances mattered more to my mother than honesty. As long as everyone smiled for the family photo, it didn't matter who was quietly carrying everyone else's burdens. That year, my younger sister, Emily, was engaged. Every conversation eventually circled back to her upcoming wedding. She wanted a luxury venue overlooking the ocean, a designer dress flown in from Europe, a live orchestra, custom floral installations, and a guest list that kept growing every week. Everyone admired her plans. No one asked how any of it would be paid for. I sat quietly, sipping iced tea, trying to enjoy dinner without becoming part of another conversation about wedding colors or imported champagne. Then my mother stood up and gently tapped her wine glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. "I'd like everyone's attention," she said with a smile that instantly made my stomach tighten. She looked directly at me. "We've made a family decision." I frowned. "We all know your sister deserves the wedding she's always dreamed of." Several relatives nodded. Mom continued, "The total budget is about $82,000. A few people whistled in admiration. Then she smiled even wider. "And since you're the successful one, we've decided you'll be paying for it." For a moment, I honestly thought she was joking. Nobody laughed. Instead, every pair of eyes in the room turned toward me. Emily reached across the table and squeezed her fiancé's hand, already smiling as if the money had been transferred. Dad cleared his throat but didn't say a word. One of my aunts said, "It's only fair. Family helps family." Another cousin added, "You can afford it." I felt my face grow hot. No one had asked me. No one had even hinted at this conversation before today. My mother folded her hands together as though she were announcing wonderful news. "If you love this family, you'll do the right thing." I finally found my voice. "I'm not paying for an $82,000 wedding." The smile disappeared from her face. "So that's your final answer?" "Yes." She took a slow breath before speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Then don't expect to be part of this family anymore." The room went completely still. "You either pay for your sister's wedding," she said, pointing directly at me, "or from this moment forward, you're dead to us." No one defended me. Not my father. Not my grandparents. Not my aunts or uncles. Not even the cousins I'd grown up with. Emily simply looked at me with quiet disappointment, as though I had ruined her life by refusing to fund it. I stood up, placed my untouched napkin beside my plate, and looked around the table one last time. None of them realized they had just made the most expensive mistake of their lives. So without raising my voice, I picked up my coat, walked out the front door, and let the silence behind me say everything I no longer needed to. As I drove away from my parents' house that night, I wasn't angry. I was exhausted. The ultimatum at Thanksgiving hadn't come out of nowhere. It was simply the loudest chapter in a story that had started decades earlier. Growing up, there were only two roles in our family. Emily was the miracle. I was the responsibility. My parents loved telling people how talented, creative, and free-spirited my younger sister was. Every report card, dance recital, or small achievement became a family celebration. If she made a mistake, they called it part of growing up. If she changed jobs, quit another hobby, or abandoned another goal, they insisted she was finding herself. The rules were different for me. Good grades weren't celebrated. They were expected. A promotion wasn't impressive. It meant I could work even harder. Every accomplishment simply raised the bar for what my parents expected next. By the time I was 16, I had a part-time job after school. While my friends spent weekends relaxing, I was stocking shelves and saving every paycheck. My parents told me that learning responsibility would build character. Emily never had to work. Whenever she wanted spending money, my parents gave it to her without hesitation. When I questioned the difference, Mom would smile and say, "You're stronger. Emily needs more support." That sentence followed me for years. When college came around, I earned scholarships, worked evenings, and graduated with student loans that I paid off myself. Emily attended an expensive private university for 2 years before deciding it wasn't the right fit. My parents covered every tuition payment, every apartment, and every new direction she wanted to pursue. No one expected her to repay a single dollar. When our father struggled after losing his job for several months, I quietly helped with groceries and utility bills. I never mentioned it to anyone because I believed helping family was simply the right thing to do. My parents accepted every check without hesitation. Yet somehow, those sacrifices were never remembered. Instead, they became expected. If I bought myself a newer car after years of saving, relatives whispered that I must have too much money. If I took a vacation after working nonstop for years, someone inevitably asked why I couldn't share my success with the family. Meanwhile, Emily posted designer handbags, weekend getaways, and expensive dinners online, often paid for by our parents or financed with credit cards she had no intention of paying off. Whenever bills caught up with her, Mom and Dad rescued her again. Then they turned to me. "You're doing well," Mom would say. "You can help your sister just this once." But just this once never ended. Over the years, it became birthdays, rent, medical bills, car repairs, vacations, and now an $82,000 wedding. The truth was painfully simple. My family had never seen me as a son. They saw me as the dependable one, the person who would quietly solve every problem without asking for anything in return. What they didn't know was that I'd been carrying one burden they had never even noticed. And sooner or later, that secret was going to change everything. I spent the next few days expecting someone to call, not to apologize, just to ask if I had made it home safely. No one did. Instead, I woke up to text messages from relatives telling me I had embarrassed my mother on Thanksgiving. A cousin accused me of ruining Emily's happiest moment. An aunt said that if I truly loved my family, I would stop being selfish and do the right thing. Not one person asked how I felt. By the end of the week, I blocked every number that had joined the pile-on. The silence that followed was painful, but it was also peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next emergency, the next guilt trip, or the next phone call asking me to solve someone else's problem. I lived alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't luxurious, but every piece of furniture inside had been earned honestly. The coffee table came from a thrift store. The dining table had scratch marks from its previous owner. My couch had seen better days. None of it embarrassed me. It reminded me that everything I owned belonged to me because I had worked for it. My days settled into a simple routine. I left for work before sunrise, spent long hours at the office, and often stayed late taking on extra projects. In the evenings, I studied for advanced financial certifications, read books about investing and leadership, and enrolled in online courses to sharpen my skills. While some people measured success by expensive weddings or luxury vacations, I measured it by something much quieter: freedom. Every paycheck I saved instead of giving away became another step toward a life no one else could control. Looking back, I realized I hadn't been rebuilding after Thanksgiving. I'd been rebuilding for years without even knowing it. The only difference now was that I had finally stopped carrying people who refused to walk beside me. What my family still didn't realize was that my silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. And before long, they were about to discover just how much of their own stability had been resting on the shoulders of the son they had so easily thrown away. 3 years passed. In that time, I built a life that no longer revolved around earning my family's approval. Work continued to go well, and the long nights of studying eventually paid off. I earned a promotion, expanded my investments, and finally reached a place where I felt something I had never experienced growing up: peace. My phone no longer filled with demands for money. Holidays became quiet dinners with close friends instead of tense family gatherings. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis someone expected me to fix. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. When I finished a meeting and checked my phone, I froze. 23 missed calls, 15 text messages, 6 voicemails. Every one of them was from my family. My mother's first message read, *, please call us. It's important. * the second came only minutes later. *, we need to talk. Everything has gone wrong. *, then my father, who hadn't spoken to me since Thanksgiving, left his first voicemail in over 3 years. *Son, please, just call me. We should have never let things end the way they did. Even Emily had written, *, I know you're still angry, but we're family. We really need your help. * 3 years of silence. And suddenly they remembered I existed. I didn't respond. An hour later, Another call came through. This time it wasn't a family member. It was an attorney. He introduced himself and asked if I had a few minutes to discuss an urgent financial matter involving my parents. Curious, I agreed. What he told me explained every desperate phone call. A year after I walked away, my parents had continued living exactly as before. They borrowed against their home, took out additional loans, and spent far beyond their means trying to maintain the lifestyle they wanted, including helping Emily recover from the expensive wedding plans that never fully came together. Without realizing it, they had also lost the quiet financial cushion that had protected them for years. Now the debts had caught up. Creditors were demanding payment. The house was at risk. Bankruptcy was becoming unavoidable. The attorney paused before asking one final question. Your parents believe you may still be willing to help. I looked out the window for a long moment. It wasn't the first time they had reached out. It was simply the first time they had nothing left to take, except the hope that I would once again sacrifice my future to rescue theirs. A week later, I agreed to meet them. Not at my apartment. Not at their house. The attorney arranged the meeting at his office, a quiet conference room where emotions mattered less than facts. When I walked in, my parents were already seated across the table. They looked older than I remembered. My mother, once so confident, wouldn't meet my eyes. My father stared at the polished wood table with his hands folded together. Emily sat beside them, nervously twisting her engagement ring. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my mother finally broke the silence. We made mistakes, she said softly. We're asking you to help us one last time. One last time. I almost smiled. That's what you always said. The attorney cleared his throat and placed several folders on the table. I think it's important that everyone understands the complete financial history. He opened the first folder. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, canceled checks, and signed payment records dating back several years. My parents exchanged confused looks. The attorney slid the documents toward them. These payments prevented your mortgage from falling into default. My father's eyebrows knitted together. What payments? He turned another page. Every monthly payment had come from one account. Mine. My mother stared at the records as though they were written in another language. No. The attorney nodded. For nearly 6 years, your son voluntarily covered mortgage shortages, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and several emergency expenses after your refinancing was denied. Without those payments, the home would likely have entered foreclosure years earlier. The room fell completely silent. Emily looked at me, her face draining of color. You never told us. I wasn't doing it for recognition, I replied quietly. I was trying to keep my family safe. The attorney continued. After Thanksgiving 3 years ago, those voluntary payments stopped. He placed another document on the table. It showed the exact date my final transfer had been made. The day after my mother told me I was dead to the family. Everything that happened afterward, the missed mortgage payments, mounting debt, collection notices, and the threat of bankruptcy, had unfolded because the financial support they never knew existed had disappeared. My mother covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. My father whispered, all this time, we thought the bank had worked with us. No, the attorney answered gently. Your son did. No one argued. No one blamed anyone else. For the first time in my life, the truth didn't need me to defend it. The evidence had spoken for me. My mother finally looked up, tears running down her face. We treated you like a wallet, she whispered. And we never stopped to see the sun standing in front of us. I took a slow breath before answering. You didn't lose my trust the day you asked for $82,000. I met each of their eyes. You lost at the moment you believed my only value to this family was what I could pay for. No one had another word to say. The meeting at the attorney's office was the last time I saw my family. Together. Over the next several months, I heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances. My parents sold the house they had spent decades trying to protect. It wasn't the ending they had imagined, but it allowed them to pay off most of their debts and avoid bankruptcy. Emily and her husband quietly downsized their lifestyle. The extravagant wedding she had once believed she deserved became a painful reminder that appearances could never replace financial responsibility. For the first time, each of them had to live with the consequences of their own choices instead of expecting someone else to carry the burden. A few handwritten letters arrived at my apartment. Not demands, not excuses, apologies. My father admitted he had spent too many years staying silent, because keeping the peace felt easier than standing up for what was right. My mother wrote that she finally understood the difference between loving a child and depending on one. She confessed that, little by little, she had stopped seeing me as her son and started seeing me as the solution to every financial problem. Emily's letter was the shortest. She simply wrote, asterisk, I'm sorry I confused your kindness with obligation. Asterisk, I believe they were sincere. But forgiveness and reconciliation aren't always the same thing. I chose to forgive them because I didn't want resentment to define the rest of my life. I also chose not to rebuild the relationship we once had. Some bridges are not destroyed by one terrible moment. They collapse after years of neglect. Instead, I kept building the life I had created during those quiet years away from them. I focused on work I genuinely enjoyed, traveled to places I had always postponed visiting, strengthened friendships with people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide, and finally learned that peace isn't something another person gives you. It's something you protect. Sometimes people ask if I regret walking out of that Thanksgiving dinner. The answer is no. I regret how long I believed that sacrificing myself would eventually earn unconditional love. Real family doesn't measure your worth by your bank account. Real love doesn't come with invoices, ultimatums, or impossible choices. The day my mother told me to pay $82,000 or be dead to the family felt like the worst day of my life. Looking back, it was actually the day I stopped trying to buy a place in someone else's heart and finally made room to build a life where I never had to earn my value again.